Kamehame, huh? It's Segaiden episode 38.
Brought me food, held me, showed me that special part of himself.
Right there in the waiting room?
We have one final Master System sports release for 1986, Super Tennis. Now this isn't part of the generally unpleasant Great Sports line, but it did ship in a Sega card, so quality-wise, it could go either way. Well, that's embarrassing. I said that Sega rarely imitated Nintendo during the 8-bit days, and now here's Super Tennis to make me look like a liar. Super Tennis looks almost exactly like the NES black box title Tennis, to the point that it seems almost actionable. From the character sprites, to the animation, to the singles or doubles option, to the way the ball scales up and down as it casts a shadow. Super Tennis is an almost shameless duplicate of Nintendo's game. The graphics boast a little bit more detail than those of Nintendo's game, as you'd expect from a game that shipped on Mark III nearly 2 years after the Famicom version of Tennis. The controls work a little differently, and you don't have Mario as the line judge, but otherwise this basically boils down to Nintendo Tennis, but from Sega. To be fair though, what else would you expect? Sure, the graphics could have been a little less black box-like, but really once Nintendo published Tennis, it more or less defined the genre for a decade. Until the genre went properly 3D, everyone's tennis game looked like Nintendo's Tennis. And to be fair, Sega had already grasped this format before Nintendo published their game. Logitech's take on the genre showed up on SG-1000 as Champion Tennis. Though far less refined than Nintendo's game, Champion Tennis stands out as one of the first interpretations of the sport to feature a behind-the-player perspective and a court rendered with a low-to-the-ground vanishing point. I credit Champion Tennis for almost getting the tennis genre right in video form, and you can hardly blame Sega and Logitech that Nintendo followed up with a more polished iteration of the same format half a year later. That was practically a decade in early 1980s video game time. Super Tennis, then, owes as much to Champion Tennis as it does to anything the competition ever produced. Probably. Anyway, you'll find the fundamentals of tennis ably represented here. 2 or 4 competitors go at it, serving the ball across the court and observing all the rules of the real-world game. You need to serve cross-court, return the ball before its second bounce in your court, and be mindful of your character's favored hand, as hitting the ball with your body counts as an in and awards your opponent the point. Super Tennis uses the same proper weirdo scoring system as professional tennis, with the score advancing from love to 15, then 30, then 40, then game point. No, it doesn't have to make sense, it's tradition. It plays as smoothly as you'd expect from a game that looks so much like Nintendo's Tennis, which also played incredibly well. And again, the parallels between this and Black Box Tennis didn't really seem like a disadvantage or anything at the time. Rather, it simply ensured that Master System maintained a competitive edge against the NES here in the early days of 1986. Sure, the NES had Hogan's Alley and Tennis, but Master System had Marksman Shooting and Super Tennis. All things being equal, why not pick up the console with the cool graph paper box art? Or rather, why not pick the console that stood apart by playing host to your platformer of choice? You could go with Super Mario Bros. On NES, sure, but maybe the exotic onigiri-munching allure of Alex Kidd better suited your interests. I don't think it's entirely fair to compare Alex Kidd in Miracle World to Nintendo's Super Mario Bros., but that's kind of how Sega themselves positioned it, so really, there's no way to get around it. Honestly, the Mario and Alex Kidd games don't have that much in common. You can find a far more direct Mario analog on Sega platforms in the form of Wonder Boy, a game whose creators consciously looked to Nintendo's work and attempted to improve on it. Alex Kidd's origins have very little to do with Mario, and you don't need to look terribly hard to see just how differently Miracle World plays from Super Mario. No, to properly understand this adventure, you need to look beyond the world of video games and into other media, specifically into the world of manga and anime. Before he was his own guy, Alex Kidd began life as Goku, the monkey-like hero of Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball franchise. As confirmed by designer Kotaro Hayashida in 2018, Sega set out to create a game based on the Dragon Ball property, but for some unspecified reason, that license fell apart. Perhaps because Epoch had a lock on the license for its Super Cassette Vision Dragon Ball game. Whatever the case, Sega's plans didn't come to fruition, but they chose not to kill the project. Instead, they reworked the material into Alex Kidd in Miracle World, an original property that would give the Master System its effective mascot for years to come. In that sense, I suppose there is some commonality between Mario and Alex Kidd, since Nintendo's evergreen hero began life as Popeye. The resulting Master System release definitely has a Mario-ish vibe to it, consisting of multiple stages that scroll horizontally left to right and contain both cash to collect and secrets to uncover. Alex also has to navigate both underwater and sky-based stages. You need to deal with the limitations of Ratchet scrolling. And, well, honestly that's about it. It's more interesting to examine the many ways in which Miracle World differs from Super Mario Bros. Than to look at the broad similarities between the two games. For one thing, Alex wields a built-in ability to fight foes directly. Rather than jumping on bad guys, he punches them in the face. The combat in Miracle World works a lot like that of Ghost House, in that you have to take out foes with a short-range strike. And the controls have a loose feeling that makes the action pretty tricky to deal with, especially since Alex only has 3 lives and goes down in a single hit. Learning to maneuver our hero safely into position to battle bad guys without getting a fatal face full of monster takes practice, and this is a huge game to complete with a mere 3 lives. However, you can give yourself a leg up by buying extra lives at the shops you encounter along the way. And when the game ends, you can continue from where you left off by inputting a simple code at the game over screen, provided that you have 400 coins in your bank account. Here we see a major point of distinction between Mario and Alex. Where Mario simply collected coins for the sake of earning points and eventually receiving a 1-up, Alex gathers bags of cash in order to make selective purchases. As with Fantasy Zone, we again see Sega looking ahead to future trends by integrating an actual economy into an action game. This concept would explode into Japanese platform action games over the course of the following year, but here in 1986 the idea of using your cash to buy goods had yet to enter the mainstream of the medium in any real way. I wouldn't say that Alex Kidd in Miracle World does anything particularly amazing with the concept, but we're still a good half year or more away from the initial debut of games like Black Tiger, Wonder Boy and Monsterland, Legacy of the Wizard, Fazzanadu, and Castlevania 2. So Sega deserves points for even trying. Here's a fizzy platformer with a basic shop system. Quite the innovation. And what can you buy in shops? Well, most enticingly, you can accumulate extra lives, a real boon in a game so stacked against the player. But you can also purchase an attack upgrade that gives your punch a little more range. Some magic capsules that boost your defenses, a cane of flight that lets you levitate for a few seconds, and teleport power that lets you vanish briefly to slip past bad guys, kinda like Kazamaru in the Ninja. You can also buy vehicles in the form of a motorcycle and a petacopter, which give you a speed boost, allow you to take an extra hit, and add a forward projectile to your repertoire. I feel like these items owe their existence to Wonder Boy and its skateboard, and also to Miracle World's Dragon Ball roots. You don't need to stretch the old imagination to envision these rounded shop buildings as being capsule corporation outlets, and the vehicles being capsule products like the number 4 hovercar and the number 9 motorcycle. You also have a free vehicle in the form of a submarine that can help you maneuver underwater. Alex is kind of annoying to control in water on his own, so the submarine makes things a lot easier. You can earn money by punching everything in sight. Alex commands a power called Shell Core, which allows him to break rocks with his fists, and shattered stones often yield bags of cash. But also horrible ghosts that chase you down to kill you just to be nasty. Alex Kidd in Miracle World features fussy controls, instant deaths, tons of hidden items, and lots of elements that seem designed to totally screw you over. Take, for example, the bosses. In what almost certainly constitutes another carryover from Dragon Ball, your encounters with the game 4 bosses always begin with a game of Jonkin, that is, rock, paper, scissors. If you lose these throws, you lose a life, a very arbitrary penalty. Apparently the bosses always use the same patterns, and you can buy a tool called the Telepathy Stone to help clue you into your opponent's next move. But still, it seems pretty harsh. And all of this builds up to a final puzzle in which you need to carefully jump on a set of stones in the correct order, which you can only determine by finding 5 hidden treasures throughout the game in order to receive a stone tablet when you rescue the King of Radaxia from Jonkin the Great. I find myself torn on Alex Kidd in Miracle World. On one hand, the game has a lot of ambition, and in the context of its original release, it featured a lot more variety than any other platform action title on the market at this point. It has a lot of personality too, with Alex completing each stage not by defeating a monster or sliding down a flagpole, but rather by grabbing an onigiri to snack on. Sega of America didn't even redraw it into a hamburger. Amazing. but it also relies heavily on unearned difficulty, with comparatively unrefined controls that demand a lot of practice, tons of arbitrary gotcha design, and iffy collision detection on your attacks. Sega positioned this as a rival to Super Mario Bros., but despite its grand ambitions, it just isn't as well designed as Nintendo's classic, with sloppier level designs and enemy placement. It just doesn't feel as natural or intuitive to play. But again, disregard the marketing line. This is a game that had no real parallel on any other console at the time. Alex Kidd in Miracle World deserves a top-to-bottom overhaul to sand down the rough edges and highlight the strengths. Unfortunately, all it got instead was a more or less one-to-one remake with improved graphics and music in the form of Alex Kidd in Miracle World DX. Oh well, the strengths still shine through if you're willing to be patient, and Alex Kidd would show up again in multiple sequels and spin-offs well into the Genesis era. Some good, some decidedly not, but all interesting in their own way. And with that, we come to the end of Master System's first calendar year, 1986. If you count Snail Maze as a separate title, which you probably shouldn't, the console already has 20 games to its name. That's just a little more of half of what the NES offered at this point, and considerably more than what you could pick up for Atari 7800, the only other new console available on the American market at this point. I'd say that the Master System lineup compares favorably to the NES's. It's smaller, sure, but it feels a lot newer, given how many of the Nintendo offerings to this point came from 1983 or 84 and ran on simple NROM chips. For fans of shooters, Sega definitely comes out ahead. For sports and light gun enthusiasts, Nintendo has the edge. And Nintendo definitely comes out ahead with platformers and puzzle-type games, thanks to the likes of Super Mario Bros., Wrecking Crew, Balloon Fight, Clu Clu Land, and the Silver Label arcade classics. Still, despite getting a later start, Sega has come on strong. And if you were to look at 1986 in American console gaming without any sense of what was to come in the future, you'd honestly be hard-pressed to say whether Nintendo or Sega would end up on top. Unfortunately for Sega, Nintendo would repeatedly revolutionize console gaming throughout 1987 on NES, as would its third-party partners, the true secret to the NES's success. But don't worry, Sega fans, 1987 may not have works on the level of The Legend of Zelda, Punch-Out!, Mega Man, or Castlevania in store for Master System, but there's plenty of quality fare to look forward to regardless, as we'll soon see. Next time on Segaiden, with Master System's 1986 lineup complete, we look at Mark III's Japan-exclusive releases for the year.